So I now call that shy retiring Graham Stuart.
I beg to move that an humble address be presented to Her Majesty as follows. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, beg leave to offer our humble thanks to Your Majesty for the gracious speech which was addressed to both Houses of Parliament. It's a great honour for me and for my constituents in Beverley and Holderness to propose the humble address, and all the more so in this Platinum Jubilee. To say that this packed chamber is intimidating and creates a certain amount of nerves, I think we can all take as read. We wish Her Majesty the best of health and thank her for her 7 decades of service to this nation. Her Majesty has demonstrated a selflessness which puts the rest of us, perhaps not least in here, to shame. The legislative agenda we are debating today must be seen within the most alarming of international contexts. Russia's unprovoked and unjustifiable attack on Ukraine has united the whole of this House in condemnation. We stand together with our friends in Ukraine, and I congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman, the Leader of the Opposition, for his party's wholehearted backing of the measures to support the Ukrainians. We are providing, Mr. Speaker, rocket launchers, complete with rockets, so different from the Trident submarines that the Honourable Gentleman's party previously proposed, which were to have been built, but you will remember, never armed. Now, no one in politics, Mr. Speaker, minds being senior, but equally no one wishes to be seen as past it. Yet today I fulfil the role of the old duffer whose best days are behind him. While my honourable friend, the member for Brecon and Radnorshire, plays the part of the up-and-coming talent. The Chief Whip certainly made the right decision with the latter choice, as we shall soon hear. But given my part today, Mr. Speaker, I thought I'd dispense some advice, both to those seeking to enter Parliament and young thrusters who are already here, many of whom elected as long as 2 years ago. And you know who you are. Can't believe that you're still not in the cabinet. Mr. Speaker, some of us are here for a long time, some for a short time, and some, according to our media friends, for a good time. So, for the candidates, my advice is keep going and realise how much simply comes down to luck. When I applied to Beverley and Holderness Conservative Association, the senior officers had already decided who they were going to have as their candidate. None other than their then Member of the European Parliament, who wouldn't be able to continue in that role, the now Right Honourable Member for Scarborough and Whitley. After I won that selection, by 2 votes, 2 elderly lady members congratulated me. They told me they had voted for me. And the first one said, "You spoke very well, Mr. Stuart." "Thank you," I said. And the other one came in, "Yes, but Robert Goodwill, he was brilliant." To which the other replied, "But he's got a job already." Robert, of course, won selection in Scarborough. He then went on to overturn Laurie Quinn's, a 3,500 majority, and was, I think, along with my honourable friend, the member for Shipley, the only Conservative candidate in the whole of the north of England to take a seat from the Labour Party at that election. Yeah. The Leader of the Opposition must wish it was so today. Instead, the only thing opening up for him in the north is a police investigation. Now, some months after the election, I met a member of my association's executive committee, and he actually congratulated me and said that he was glad that I had been selected as the candidate after all. I thought at last my hard work was being recognised, and he added, because he said, because you'd have never won Scarborough. My constituency of Beverley and Holderness comprises 4 towns: Beverley, Hornsey, Withensea and Heddon, and many other hamlets and villages which are dotted across East Yorkshire. It's a beautiful part of the world and has history as well as charm. Beverley has contributed more than most places to the improvement of our democratic system over the years. Admittedly, Mr. Speaker, chiefly by running elections in such a corrupt manner that the law had to be changed after the unseating of the victorious candidate in 1727 by petition. His agents were imprisoned and Parliament passed a whole new Bribery Act. But, Mr. Speaker, Beverley's notorious freemen were not to be put off so easily. Beverley continued to be a byword for electoral malpractice. The novelist Anthony Trollope stood in the Liberal interest unsuccessfully in 1868, and such was the level of wrongdoing that a royal commission was established especially, and a new law passed, disenfranchising the town and barring it from ever returning a Member of Parliament.
Happy days.
Obviously, the law did change. Free beer and cash inducements were the electoral controversies then, rather than, say, beer and curry today. Never, Mr. Speaker, never in the history of human conflict has so much karma come from a corner. I said I would provide some advice for our up-and-coming parliamentarians. When I arrived here, I was just about wise enough to back the winner of the leadership contest that summer, David Cameron. What I wasn't wise enough to do, Mr. Speaker, was stop telling him every way in which I thought he was going wrong. And I do mean every way. Which, funnily enough, resulted in an 11-year wait to be asked to go onto the front bench, which only came when he'd stepped down. Now, it may be that my right honourable friend, the member for Maidenhead, saw merit where her predecessor did not. But more likely it was just that she'd seen a lot less of me. So, lesson 1 for the up-and-coming: don't make an enemy of your party leader. But there is, of course, more to this place than the front bench. In my first term, community hospitals were being closed in swathes right across the country. And all 3 in my constituency were lined up for the chop. Now, having led marches and demonstrations in all the towns across my constituency, it became obvious that the problem would not be solved locally. So I set up a campaign group, Chart, Community Hospitals Acting Nationally Together. And along with my deputy chairman, the then member for Henley, we recruited colleagues from right across this House. We waged guerrilla warfare on Labour's health department, breaking the record for the number of petitions presented in one day in this House. We held a rally outside this place with hundreds of people and banners and placards galore. David Cameron spoke, Labour MPs spoke. My deputy, I remember, gave a rousing speech and, so carried away with the righteousness of our cause, called on everyone to join us on a march to Parliament Square. So it was, Mr. Speaker, that our now Prime Minister found himself being intercepted by a police inspector who told him no permission existed for such a march and that we must go back. So I think there are two lessons here. Never stop campaigning for what you believe in, and having marched your troops to the top of the hill, never be afraid to march them down again if circumstances necessitate. Now, when the call did come, I was lucky enough to go into the Whip's office, the only communal playpen in Westminster, aside from the creche. Being there made me realise how little I knew after 11 years here, because as a Whip you learn a lot. So that's another lesson. Join the Whip's office if you are asked. Now, given my position, I'd like to tell you that being in government, isn't all it's cracked up to be. But actually it is. I served both my right honourable friend, the member for North Somerset, and my right honourable friend, the member for South West Norfolk, as Secretaries of State for the Department for International Trade. Both were exceptional. They were tireless and demanding, but delivered outcomes from a new department which no one thought was possible. So, young thrusters, enjoy any department you're in and value it for itself, not just as a stepping stone to something else. After all, as I discovered last September, you never know when you'll prematurely be on the backbenches. Today's Queen's speech unveils a substantial legislative programme under 4 main headings: boosting economic growth and helping with the cost of living, making our streets safer, funding the NHS and tackling the backlog, and providing leadership in troubled times. To pick out one item, if I may, Mr. Speaker, the energy bill is of particular importance to my constituents. It'll make possible the development of hydrogen and carbon capture and storage, for which I expect the Humber not only to be a national leader, but actually a global leader in their development, taking us to net zero, but also giving us energy security and huge export potential. So the Conservative Party, under the leadership of my right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, has work to do. We were elected to deliver our manifesto and level up the United Kingdom, and that is what we will do. Despite the human weakness which is all too present in this place, I believe nearly everyone here is in politics for the right reasons, and that elected public service continues to be a noble calling. So I hope that potential candidates from all sides will continue to come forward, that young thrusters will show ambition for their country as well as for themselves, and that as we fire legislative bullets at the challenges that face us, we will take aim in this Platinum Jubilee year and, like our Ukrainian friends, say with total conviction, God save the Queen. I commend the gracious speech to this House.